Welcome to Unit 4, Section 2. In this podcast, we're going to talk about interesting things such as cautions, contraindications, and how you might go about referring your client. Charlotte, do you want to open for us with contraindications and cautions?
Yeah, so the first thing that's worth talking about is what they are. So these are anything that will prevent or alter your delivery of treatment. So it could be medical conditions that should be picked up and discussed as part of your consultation, but could be anything that might sort of just affect the way you treat. So you're okay to carry on, but you might need to just adapt what you're doing.
Okie dokie, should we divide cautions and contraindications down a little bit?
Yeah, I think if we look at them one at a time. So caution is something that's going to need adapting in your treatment, an adaptation. So you can still treat, but it would mean working with the client in different positions. So pregnancy is a really good example. So you might need less pressure, different position, but you're still able to treat. Could also be client's age, so old or young. Somebody who's older might have potential issues with osteoporosis, might need to just change your techniques. Other things to consider: massage lotions, so even an allergy could be something that you need to think about, and sort of skin condition. And just using different techniques as well can be really, really useful just to change the way you treat to a caution.
So that's cautions for you, and that means you can generally still treat, but you just need to amend the way you do it.
Yeah, exactly that.
Okie dokie. So next we've got contraindications. So these can actually prevent you from treating at the time, and you might need to get some additional guidance on these, mightn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
But first of all, let's break it down. So contraindications come into two categories. So they're subdivided into localized and systemic. What's the difference between localized and systemic contraindications?
Okay, so the general rule is obviously with a contraindication, we're not necessarily going to treat it. However, it's a local contraindication. It's narrowed down to a specific area. So that area typically can be avoided, but you might be able to treat the rest of the body quite happily. So things that listed in the manual will give you an idea of areas and things to do, but it might be a skin condition, so impetigo, or lice potentially, very unusual, but something like that, easily spread if you treat the area, but you can very easily avoid it.
Okie dokie. And things like, then you've got things like athlete's foot, stuff like that again, which is also contagious, but you wouldn't necessarily not treat because of it.
Exactly. So you can avoid the area, but you can treat the rest of the body quite happily. So a systemic contraindication then is quite different. So that tends to be something that is affecting an entire system. And obviously that creates a much bigger issue in terms of treatment.
Okay, so some good examples of systemic contraindications would be common cold for a start.
Yeah.
So you think, oh, that's not a problem, but actually treating someone with a common cold is a really bad idea, isn't it?
Yeah, you can make them a lot worse, and also you're more likely to catch it. So then, of course, you can't work. So it's a twofold one, that one.
And also spreading it onto other clients. If you've
exactly.
got elderly clients coming in, they're much more susceptible to this sort of stuff. And then more serious ones that you might think about are things like blood pressure, heart conditions, cancers. Yeah. So what would you do in these circumstances?
So typically you're not going to treat. Your first thing is, if in doubt, do not. If you're in any risk of impairing or making an issue with somebody's health, you don't treat. Something like blood pressure is always worth having a conversation potentially with the GP. So that'd be really good. Refer your client back to the GP to get permission to check that you're safe to treat them. So someone who's got very stable blood pressure, even if it's a little bit high or low potentially, can be okay to treat, but it's much better to have GP permission and ensure that you're safe to do that.
Yeah, so if in doubt, do now.
Yeah.
Just because there is so many contraindications with different guidelines, there is a list in your manual and also one on Moodle. So we're not going to go through each individual one today because you will fall asleep. But Charlotte did mention something quite interesting there about referring to the GP. So you can refer to lots of different people for lots of different reasons, can't you? So if we just chat about referrals briefly first, and then what information you might put down if you're going to refer.
Yeah, so you can refer to anyone for a variety of reasons. We mentioned referring to a GP if you want permission to treat, or if you want clarity on whether the individual is safe to treat, or if it's within your own scope of practice. The other reason you might be looking to refer someone is if their condition isn't improving. Perhaps you've done a couple of treatments, and they're not getting better, or the results aren't as good as you might like. So you might need advice or support from an additional therapist or practitioner. Doesn't necessarily mean you've done anything wrong, but it might mean that you need additional support. So there are a variety of people you might like to refer to.
So this could be a physiotherapist, chiropractor, podiatrist, potentially, even a counsellor, because some conditions can relate to mental health as well, can't they?
Absolutely.
So you might need to bring that element in. Also personal trainers if there's imbalances in the body and you're not qualified in that field yourself. So there's lots of different people you can refer to. Now, actual referrals, there's a couple of ways to do this. There's kind of the very official way and the very not so official way, isn't there? So with a GP, you really need to do the official approach because you need to get written response back. So let's have a talk about the two ways that you can refer.
So typically what you're going to be doing is, firstly, before you do anything else, is ask your client for permission.
Very important.
However you activate your referral, it's really important that your client is involved in the process and understand who you're referring them to and why. Otherwise, they might start to get a bit concerned as well. So what you're going to do after that, once they've sort of given you permission, you are going to write a letter. Now, this is going to contain all the information you need, but it is going to be a formal letter, written and signed and dated, and that it can stay on the client's file for as long as Data Protection Act dictates.
Okie dokie. So also with that, when we talk about permission, you actually need to get signed permission for this, don't you? So create yourself a basic form which you can fill in the blanks on and get your client to send it, and you need to send that with the referral letter, so it gives the other person the other end permission to reply back to you, and keep a copy on your records as well. So you've got a copy of the consent form and a copy of the referral form.
So what are you going to put into that letter? So it's going to need to include the client's name, their date of birth, address, and that means that you'll be able to ensure that you're talking about the same person when it goes. So it's an identifiable features.
There's a lot of John Smiths, isn't there?
Yeah,
so I've got John Smith from Kingswood here, and he would like to know if I can treat him.
So the other thing is who you are. What the problem is, and why you're seeking either permission, or if you're permission to treat, or what the reason for your referral is. So why do you think they need to see somebody else?
So from a GP, you're really looking for a response back, aren't you? In writing, saying that yes or no you can or can't treat, and any things that they recommend is a good or bad idea. With a physiotherapist, you don't necessarily expect a reply back, but you might get one, and they may work very closely with you, which is perfect. The other way of doing referrals to people like physiotherapists and chiropractors is to actually just have some people that you really rate and have a phone number that you can pass on to your client, and they can contact them directly, which will take out a lot of the formality for you. But what it does mean is that you won't necessarily get back the additional information that you need, and it might not be a more flowing system.
So what we'll often do is put some notes perhaps on a business card and send that over to your client, give it to your client as they leave. They're then able to take that with them when they go off and see another practitioner, and that will mean that A, they don't forget anything, but B, if the other therapist that you've referred to does have any queries, they're able to contact you as well. So that can be quite a useful way to do it.
Really good way of doing it. And then they've got your number as well, haven't they? So
hopefully they'll refer back one day.
You never know. So one more thing is working in a multidisciplinary team, which is something I did for a couple of years. And actually that's a really easy way of referring, because you all use the same set of notes. They're generally online and you've all got access to them. So all you do is take your client back to reception and say you need to book an appointment with the physio, and then the physio can see what you've done and the physio can make notes. And the other thing is you will bump into your colleagues in the corridor. So you do talk about clients a little bit more if you've referred them. I'll say, I've referred so-and-so to you, they've booked an appointment, you need to think about this and this, or this is why I've sent them to you, whatever.
Yeah, it's quite a nice way of doing it like that, isn't it? Working with other people.
Yeah, but you're not always in a situation where you work like that, so it's just one of those one of those options, isn't it?
It certainly is. So there you have it. That is Unit 4, Section 2. We've looked at cautions, contraindications that are going to make you a safe and professional practitioner, but also just discussed a little bit about how you're going to refer someone. Now, of course, there is more information online and on your manual.
So have a good read of the contraindications, because they are all very different, and it's important to know when you should and shouldn't treat.
Yeah.
So just get them in your head and understand what might be a problem and what might not.
So you've got a couple of tasks to complete before moving on to the next section, all of which will form part of your Unit 4 assignment.
Excellent.